Well, if we look at ourselves, and people think it's people like speaking into the complexity of our group structure, but if we take it as, wow, look, they built an abundant structure, so no one person should feel the weight of this whole thing. Yeah, because everybody should be duly responsible for their portion and responsive to each other. That's the ultimate artistry of our tribal organisation as it is. And then we have to remember that we serve only to resource the iwi and their awesomeness. We don't exist to serve any other goal or to serve an organisation. That's not the point.
Nau mai hara mai tipa, ki tēnei ui, e pāna ki te toru tekau o te tutukitanga o te take Raupatu. I'm looking forward to this interview. I'm not sure how it's going to go. You're a friend, you're a sparring partner, and you're my sister, and you have a number of perspectives in relation to the 30-year settlement journey. So I see that you've brought a special taonga here today. How would you characterise this moment in terms of remembering the settlement?
Well, as we were setting up, this is Raupatu, by the way. So Raupatu's been with us for the 30 years, originally gifted by the iwi to Papa. Hei mai maharatanga ki oia, ki te ariki nui hoki kei oia tētahi. Mō ngā mahi utaina ki runga i a rāua whakatutuki te kaupapa nei. But I was looking at the taura and it reminded me of the Okapu Paukai. We were there and Te Ariki Nui was looking for a name to replace the Te Kaumaru at the time. And if you've ever been to Okapu, they pull the rope during the pōwhiri, and every mokopuna and kaumātua stands on the marae and they hold the rope. And the ara taura is us as tainui waka pulling our waka in. And so if I was to liken it to today and the taura that we have here, it's just our turn at holding the rope. Yeah? 30 years, yep. People can say, well, what a milestone, it's post-settlement. But again, it's this generation's turn to pull in the rope and to pass it on to the next reanga. So, te rapia, te ao ngā kōrero i te rangi nei. Just our turn. It will carry on this ara taura to the next reanga and the next reanga. And ko te tino tūmanako that each time we pull this rope, it's only connected more to the source of who we are. And it's pulling through more of who we want to be.
So let me take you back to those early years, just as people were working hard on getting the settlement together and getting prepared to, go into negotiations. Where were you during those early years, just before settlement?
I think the Trust Board years, they were... I didn't know it at the time. I thought everyone was doing this, but they were running around doing projects everywhere. Whenua, PEP scheme, you name it, they were doing it. It was our normal, so I didn't know that that's not what every other community around the motu was doing, because it's the kohanga we grew up in, where maraes were very active, and whānau hapua niwi came together to get stuff done. And maybe it was stuff that we could do, but there was a sense of belief that long as we were together, we could do anything.
And did it feel exciting during that time? And what were you doing and what were you observing in terms of the people that were around your community, our community?
As a kid going around the kaupapas, I think I heard the old people discuss a lot why. Like what Kingitanga is the glue. Not as the problem, but as the glue to our future. What would that require of us? Although I didn't understand the politics of it, I know we were doing a lot together as a niwi, a lot of fundraising, a lot of commissioning each other to get Te Ariki Nui or the kaumātua somewhere, or support the work of the Trust Board somehow, because we were all going to push forward, and that Raupatu is something that we were going to solve in this generation. There was no question about it.
So in those early years, just before Raupatu was kind of resolved,
yeah.
Did the Kingitanga feel different during those days? And
I think if I was, and maybe you know, get the hindsight, but I remember thinking that, and as I grew up and matured, and even now, that, and maybe it's pre-technology, so people had to spend their words really wisely, and because you were going to be quoted from your one hui kōrero to the next few huis till you showed up again. But so people really spoke into their intention, and it was very deliberate. So not a lot of arerorua, and you were called out if you were anyway. So people really pono to their kōrero. If they said they were going to show up, they would be there. If they said it had their support, they would support it. If they said they were going to get a train to Wellington, for example, they got the train to Wellington. How they did it, their resolve is absolutely amazing. But there was a sense of real grit, of you know, consolidating ngā marae tōpū at the time. So I don't know, because Te Arekinu was a mature queen when I was born, but no doubt they had all of those waananga about the te kaumārua, and ngā marae tōpū was becoming the glue, reconsolidating people's commitment to the things that tōpū was going to do under the old whalawhati and all of them, eh? So I understood that was consolidating our iwi effort, what was happening at ngā marae tōpū. And then we were going to Māori Congress, where they were trying to do that all over the motu as well, find a way forward. But the arc of the 80s, I would say that, you know, before we had anything, we had these huge dreams of who we wanted to be, but the flavour of it was we definitely knew who we were. We just didn't know how we were going to get to where we wanted to go. Yeah. If I was to look back at where we got to, now we seem to be pretending to ask ourselves who we are. You know, that whole mana motuaki question, which I don't think it's a bit, but we can get to that when we get to the now.
so in terms of the kaumātua, the korohiki and the ruruhi that you observed in those early years around just before settlement, what type of characteristics, support, leadership, mentoring did you observe they were practicing?
I saw, if we were to talk about things like kōhau te rongo and our practices of dispute resolution, in front, under the light of day, waananga until it's done. You know, the hui would not collapse until that matter was resolved, or it had been sent for resolution somewhere. And it would normally have this suite of names. I can remember there's a few times Pere kere me te wāhi, te whāngai out on the coast, but when things of note needed to be spoken to, a kaumātua like that would stand up and clear the way about how we were going to address it to keep everybody's mana intact, because they weren't into pot shots. They weren't into pot shots, they weren't into discipline if you weren't in the room. He mana tō te tangata. But also, it was more likely, and I heard our father do it, that you take responsibility for anything that you did, whether you intended to harm or not, just so that people could come to a resolution around it. You didn't make it hard for people to hold you to account. You showed up for the growling, you know, and you walked into your accountability.
Well, let me just kind of quiz you on the gender roles of leadership between our kaumātua and our ruruhi. Was there any separation, or did they come together in certain ways that made it very clear that, you know, we were valuing the knowledge and the skills, the mātauranga of our koroheke and our ruruhi?
I always, well, again, we were around old people like Korokapo, Uncle Pomi, Nana, Iti, I mean, all of them, Nahina, you name the nanas at the time. But I don't think they focused on gender half as much as we do nowadays. It was just ko wai ka mōhio, ki wera kōrero. And whoever he or she was, it was made sure that they were in the room, because maybe they held the whakapapa or the hōhau kōrero or the history, but it wasn't gendered.
He mana tō te tangata ahakoa he wahine he tānera.
Ko te mea ke ngā taonga I poipoia e rātou, o kia rātou rānei, e me ngā kōrero. And I've seen it heaps around Koropomi, because he often had to reach into the woman for a lot of the wairua work he did. For whatever reason, they had an openness, eh? And then if you just think about, but at the same time, we had war chiefs like Korobinga, who you knew, he had us, didn't matter who the huarere might show up, whether he could outsmart them or not, but he just had a fundamental belief in our right to be self-determining in who we are. But no one talked those words, they just did it. No one taught mana motuhake, they just were it. And we definitely didn't talk rangatiratanga, because one thing I know I learnt from them is by the time you're talking rangatiratanga, you don't have any. It's something that you've bargained out there, whereas mana motuhake is innate, it's who we are, we're breathing into it. And I think we were getting back to the sense of that, but not going from the theory to the practice. Yeah.
Can I take you to, again, in those early years and the role of kaumātua and kuia, when they went up the river and they formed a tira to go up the river. Can you explain what the thinking was at the time? I think you were a part of the team that captured a lot of the kōrero.
We were back working for the tribe by then. But just a couple of things before we get to the river. So in as much as for the land, they did very much the work of going around to making our sites of significance, sites that were sung into, sites that were battled over, so that we could whakawātea for the Raupatu, for the land question. So by the time, and that went down its course, which no doubt Shane and other experts have spoken into. By the time we came to the river, kei reira tonua pāpā, it was sort of how do we bring that sense of things to the river as well. We're lucky because our whanaunga and wangani, the other teardrop, they were ready to go. And they had already called Te Arekinui to go down their river. And so she came back with her question to Papa, I can't go down their river if I haven't done mine. And so Huakina and others made her tira very quick, but she said, we've got to take the old people up properly. So not too long after that, we did the tira that you're talking about with our old people. But one thing about being a rangatahi then, and again, we were encouraged to go to university and bring that pukinga back to our iwi, whatever it was. I don't think they were too fussy then. It's like, you'll do. But to come back to iwi. So the privilege of serving was probably what got us here. The privilege of coming back and serving. But the other thing that I know is that we were always treated as promises, not problems.
Can you explain that a bit more?
So we were reanga and they appreciated that we didn't have all of the same, sometimes marae smarts, tikanga smarts, reo smarts, or even the same pukinga out of university. But the old people absolutely believed in the promise of our potential, as long as they provided us with the right guidance, support, you know, more for our emotional selves, because the rest of it, we're pukinga to burn, right? Then kataia te iwi. And we were a promise of a future. We weren't a problem, rangatahi, portion to be managed, because we might be bored or go reckless or go rogue or something, or have out the gate kind of views. They were happy to be extended by us. They were happy that we were going to see further than them. And they really privileged us the future. So it's something I speak to a lot, because I think we problemise our rangatahi a lot, rather than see in them the promise that they truly are. So I would love to be that co-med. That's my challenge to self.
Well, me hepe atu ki taua wā, te wā e tāpiri atu koe ki te ropu o ngā grads. Let's go to the time of when you were a part of the grads team and the types of things that you were doing within that ropu. And where was the tribe at that moment when the grads were formed and you were in the team?
So the tribe was pre-settlement. Very much the Trust Board employed us, or the Centre for Māori Studies, whichever door you came in. We were employed off contracts that somebody wrote and got funded for. There was like no money to employ us. You were either brought on through this or that kind of bundle of work, or you got here and you wrote your own funding application to be funded to do what you were doing. So it was very seat of your pants kind of stuff. I guess when they say that the Trust Board used to be administered out of the boot of a car, and Joyce optimised that. Well, we came in post that. So a bit more of a car, a bit more of a building. There was at least a set office and a phone number. But again, the privilege of coming back and doing something that was needed and have all that kaumātua support, direct mentoring from the types of, like, not just Dad, but Shane, John, Tom, you name them. Mum, Raupo, Bobbin, for Judith and others, eh? Didn't matter which door you walked in, there was a tuakana there who wanted you to do really well.
Can you remember any tasks that you were given as a young grad that you thought, how am I going to do this,
We used to have to, I don't know, I think it was Dad trying out his mentoring toolkit on us, but we used to have to write these think pieces. And the start of it had to start off, you probably know the same better than I, but it's something like there's nothing like an idea whose time has come, because he wanted us to be open frame, and then we'd have to write about whatever it is we were doing. But one of the most random ones, everyone will know and tell you which book they got given. But I think he just grabbed a book off the shelf, you walked in the room and he gave you the book. But everyone was trying to figure out, why did he give me this book? But I actually don't think there was a deliberate methodology.
What was your book?
Power by Luke's, which was that the quality of it was to give it away, to never try and consolidate, that the consolidation of powers by the week.
And you got given some tasks within the education team, I think. You were writing some of the policies.
I think I got every job that didn't really fit anywhere in particular. Yeah, I was on the and everything else Dad asked you to do list, which kind of was good training for me, because it made me do things that I'd never thought I'd be doing. With others, we wrote up the Pukawa project, for example, with Ngāti Te Wharetua, and they didn't even have any woman in the room. Pretty amazing, awesome, challenging at the age we're at. We used to have to host different, whoever visited the tribe at the time, thought leaders, professors, politicians, and we'd have to get our little briefs ready and run our 3 screens about who were Waikato and what we were trying to do. So it was challenging, but again, you felt that full support. But some of the ways they showed support, it wasn't like in the room, is that we'd practice our presentations. And then Dad or someone would act as if they were the person with the questions. And we debrief after things. We give people time and quality feedback. I know we're very time poor now, but it's something that I think we could really pull into the now, is spending quality time, a bit like this really, reflective time.
Well, what about the culture of being able to have a go, even if you didn't know, take a risk, fail and learn quickly. Was that something that you observed a lot of, or was it promoted even?
I think prior to Raupatu, yes, more so. After Raupatu, I think with the dollars gave everybody a pause, the noughts. It made everybody really go into a different type of governance rigor that was unhealthy for a little bit, when we first started. But I think just the enormity of the responsibility, not so much the amount of money, but the responsibility for the tribal estate was what might have been our overwhelm in those first few years.
And in those first few years, you commented on Te Ariki Nui being a mature leader at the time. What was the characteristic that she displayed in terms of her leadership and guidance in steering our waka forward? What did you observe?
She placed total trust. For example, the structures of post-settlement were new. Very much it was the trust board's membership, which didn't change over the course of the trust board very often, and they were the same leaders, and then she had a representative in that structure. When a structure changed, she chose to totally trust Te Kauhanganui at the time to come to its own common sense, and she would advise but not require. She'd advise her thinking in through her member, and sometimes quite directly through her own voice, but more in the advisory capacity, and leave it to the will of the people to reflect what it was they wanted, even when sometimes the decision was counterintuitive towards her or her kingitanga.
But the Kauhanganui at the time was just one forum where she could exercise her influence. There were other forums as well. And how did you see that influence kind of scaffold towards, being able to guide the waka as we went forward?
So, for example, the mature forum then would have been ngā marae tōpū. So always been available to waananga with the people, whether within her paukai, within tōpū, or available to come to the hui of the people to hear what it is they were saying and reflect back, I guess, our best intentions to us. Because again, I think as ariki, she took the role of elevating our, maybe our selfish behaviours to what's good for everybody. You know, not for each ngāti, but for ngai tātou. So I think she had that kind of maturity, and she'd lift the game often. Yeah. It upset a whole lot of leaders, including our father, because it was so benevolent. Everyone was in her pa and everyone belonged in her tent. And that's quite an interesting philosophy now, because if you read something, I think it was called, Dave wrote it in the 70s about Te Ariki Nui, about the Kingitanga at the time. She was, again, a very new queen, but the status of the movement that we inherited, and I guess that level of 70s look at Māori as urbanised, destitute aharane. And he wrote there that that's the power of the Kingitanga. It's a tent big enough for every gang, every sports team, long as their tuakiri is Māori, katoa. So that's the kōtaitanga that they were speaking into, from a very disparate diaspora of people, and trying to bring them back from some of those ways towards a modernised Kingitanga, which is what we enjoy, and kind of a lot of those practices have come into today, how we can still exercise tikanga but in this modern way.
So a modernised Kingitanga was in part the vehicle that propelled our father, Te Ariki Nui, and the leaders of the time to move into negotiation and settlement. Where were you on the day of the settlement, the signing of the settlement?
At Te Rangawai. Yeah. There, I was a young mum, so I already had my daughter, and very much, like, I think, gave Dad optimism that he could see the future through their little eyes, because we had two mokos of, at the settlement. Saw the hope in the people's eyes, kind of thing. But especially that reanga, who were brought up to know that they were, if we're going to go tongikura, e kore tēnei whakaoranga e huri. Something changed that day, and if you ask any one of them, and again, the settlement's the age of my nephews, Raupatu and Korotangi. So their oranga, they know they were born then. If it's a line in the sand of which this tauta will pull forward their futures, yeah.
And on that day, what is your most memorable kind of focal point that made you think, wow, things are changing?
Probably the visual for me that brings it all together is when Korotangi was gifted to Te Ariki Nui. Because, you knew how hard it was for the museums to let us touch our taonga after te Māori, let alone relate to them, let alone have it brought back to her at the marae. That for me is a symbol of the whole day, and her receiving that taonga on behalf of all of us.
And do you remember the look on her face?
Yeah, it was absolute joy. But it was, again, to hark back to that, her time of holding the tauta for her ancestral line. It come to not its full closure. We're not done yet, but I think she knew she had definitely, added to the tauta that was going to go down her line and be part of her legacy.
So there was a lot of hope and optimism.
Total. A lot of belief in ourselves. Self-defined too. We weren't trying to be the Joneses or keep up with anybody else. We were doing us. We're going to step into do the next few things together. No one, I think, could have prepared us for what we were going to face internally, because it hadn't been done here yet. Although we had seen, maybe Dad and a few of his colleagues in the academic space had seen how it changed the structure of tribes in other places, but there wasn't any direct experience within Waikato that could have prepared us for what it was to win the lotto me ki, go from being very pohara to very rich in Kiwi speak in a very short time frame. And what that would need for us, the capacity we would need to grow to be custodians of that. Yeah.
And moving from the trust board structure to Te Kauhanga Nui and Te Ara Taura, what were the internal challenges that we started to face?
I think the trust board, and if anyone that knows Māori trust boards here, they weren't really designed to be the future collaborators for Māori development. At best, they were going to be kaitiaki of something small to a small remit to support the iwi, but not to truly enable its futures, compel it into the future. So wrong waka me ki for where we needed to get to. But in buying the new waka, we didn't really know who we needed to be on that bus. How do you go from a highly trusting pohara people who can, turn a huge hui around on a die, not even knowing how they're going to do that, to a highly trusting multi-million-dollar iwi with those kind of new prerogatives on us. That transition, I don't think we gave ourselves enough lean in.
And the iwi chose a marae-based governance model.
Yeah, we chose marae-based.
And in moving to that level of governance, do you think that, there were challenges in those early years about moving from effectively a hapu-based governance model under the trust board system to a marae-based governance model?
I think so, but because ngā marae tōpū was marae-based, it was the segue to Te Kauhanga Nui and now Te Whakakitenga that we have today. Then you go back to what Korowhati said, ka tū te kuini kiwhia, ka tū ki runga i ōna marae. And some of the kōrero that I remember being around is that you can see a marae. It exists, it's in a location, even if it was a flat piece of land. Now you knew it stood here and this was who stood on it and these are their names. Whereas a hapu was much more anonymous out there in the universe. And being Tipa Mahuta, well, we're a third of the tribe. So calling us together is no mean feat. I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but given the unique way that Raupatu manifested in the Waikato, marae-based became kanohi kitea, became these safe places in all of this occupied territory. So I think it's a uniquely Waikato solution for that time. And now people want to talk about hapu realities, which might be the next stage of Waikato healing itself from its Raupatu internal kōrero, because there's the healing we achieved with the Crown. And again, their apology is only 30 years old and 30 years spent. So somewhat kind of a warm sorry, not totally done yet. But we haven't turned in and looked at ourselves for what other healing needed to happen within those hapu-based and iwi-based structures as well.
So, let me take you to the challenge years.
Yeah.
There was some, conflict as we were evolving through the experience of moving from the trust board to Te Kauhanga Nui and the ture versus what is tika under tikanga, and then our traditional leadership structures and our modern leadership structures. How would you characterise the challenge years that was experienced as a result of the transition?
I'd say it's even now, because some of the challenges are still the same. It's Raupatu still doing its work. It's the self-doubt that we breathe in to ourselves. It's our inability to speak into some of that hard history that we have, not with Pākehā, but we have caused each other as a result of colonial practices. So, for example, one that always comes up is who really got hurt by Raupatu, who's in the hurt tent and who's out, whose land really got taken. Well, yours didn't, so why are you in this tent? All of those but it's all defined by harm. None of it is defined by whakapapa. It's the circles of harm. Where were you when Raupatu happened? Therefore, you're in this bundle of compensation or in that bundle of compensation. If we're not careful, that'll determine who we are to each other in the future. And if I give you the example of Waikato Maniapoto me kei, even though we had 2 different settlement journeys, there are those of us who've been around long enough to know it's whakapapa, but there are those who speak through the settlement gates. And we need to get past that because that's just the vehicle.
What
It's
about
not
that period of time when the tribe was taking itself to court effectively?
Yes. Or those are the unhealthy practices. That's, I guess, the pūhaihai, and I've seen it play out in other iwi since. Right in their first 5 to 10 years of settlement, some of this stuff comes out. And it's probably a mistrust that's lived under the radar for a long time. And it could be about whatever is real for that iwi at the time, who fundamentally missed out on being recognised, or what is the trust about, or our inability to hold people financially accountable breeds more mistrust, perhaps. Those who advise us what's their interest in the advice they're giving us. Says I've been quite interested, and I'm not saying that they've all been bad, but there are once we had our economic wealth, there was all these tangata tiriti friends who wanted to come and help us with our wealth. But I wouldn't know what the kickbacks were in their community, because we are so trusting. You know.
As a result of those challenge years and taking ourselves to court and all of that.
It hurt relationships for internally too. Yeah.
Emerged the Hohau Te Rongo process. In fact, Shane Solomon speaks quite a bit to that period of time, the review, and that being an innovation based out of experience. Do you have any comments about, again, the challenge years and what we shouldn't ever repeat again? And again, Hohau Te Rongo is a very unique mechanism for the tribe.
I think hiwi whakaiti taku iwi o Waikato. I'm not saying every iwi isn't. So there's the only discipline, the only methodology here is shame. Yeah. But in a shame-based system, we could end up with everybody doing nothing for not wanting. So it's not the world I grew up in. Yeah. But that's who we've become.
Do you think that when people reflect on that value whakaiti, it's kind of not
It's the inversion
understood
of what we understood.
Right.
So whakaiti was my little girl understanding was, you can know you're good, just don't tell everybody else. Waiho mā te iwi koe e whakarangatira. All good. But you're allowed to know you're good. But now there's either whakahihi, where I'm telling everybody I am, or purposeful gaslighting and putting down of people. And it's not creating the kind of trust, innovation, vibrancy that we need to propel ourselves to the next Hawaii. It's keeping everybody down.
So what is
that conditioning?
So what are the learnings from the challenge years that we really don't need to repeat in order to get into a more prosperous, abundant space of growing the next generation with intent?
Well, if we look at ourselves, and people think people like speaking into the complexity of our group structure, but if we take it as, wow, look, they built an abundant structure, so no one person should feel the weight of this whole thing. Yeah, because everybody should be duly responsible for their portion and responsive to each other. That's the ultimate artistry of our tribal organisation as it is. And then we have to remember that we serve only to resource the iwi and their awesomeness. We don't exist to serve any other goal or to serve an organisation. That's not the point. So if we get those two settings right, we can be those leaders, those benevolent elders, even though we might be much younger doing this role, won't be in our 70s, but we can act with more intention towards the future. I'm doing this so that the next generation will be in this position. and be very deliberate, which is how I think the olds thought. And it's going to be beyond me. It's a bit like AI. I can't quite fathom it. But as long as I provide for the next generation's ability to be technically up to date, have all the access they can, and be at that winning end of that question, whatever the answer is, then that's all I can do. I can't answer the future, but I can enable it. So we need to, if we take the best of the past, reinstall a waananga and accountability process with ourselves as leadership and back into the leaders of iwi. And those aren't just Whakakitenga members. They're leaders from the marae, they're leaders from the kaiota, they're leaders in their roles. Diversity. And people need to see a group of people who are willing to work together outside of their own outcomes. Whatever it is, whether you've got a formal leadership role or whether you're the chair of a hauora or whether you're doing something, we need to know how we can lean in. The other one is, and I'll go back to Nana Popali for this, but accountability isn't a scary word. It's just a good thing. And I go back to our Nana Pop because he kept the rārangi pūtea for our whānau, said the pā for the Kingitanga to the threepence, to the shilling, to the die. And that's carried on down his line. So accountability has never been a scary thing. Just do it right, do it often. And I think at Hoho, if we have these clearinghouses where you're allowed to get little things off your shoulders, then people won't be so heavy for so long.
Your point about a lot of harm being caused to ourselves by ourselves and healing through that. I want to ask you a personal question and feel free not to answer it, but a lot of the harm during the challenge years were directed specifically at people we loved and primarily our father. In terms of healing through that time and those sequence of events, time plays its part, but also what do you think is all that could be done better so that no other family or, whānau who are feeling unresolved pain have to go through that ever again?
Part of it is being able to tell the story at its right time, and part of it is being able to tell the story and restore the truth into spaces it needs to be told. For example, in the last 10 years, it felt at least that long, this tribe wasn't even putting his photo on things. And it's not so much about him, because he was never, that important in his own mind. It was about the work, that we don't lose the discipline of how we get out. It's not about, Te Tangata, even Shane would say that as he lays there today, it's not about him, but we don't lose the discipline of how we bring the people together to achieve great things. Akutami and Tuku will speak to that in their own way too. Our biggest fear is that we forget who we are to one another, because personality, situations, politics, it may be all too convenient for people just to write people off, but there's no exile island here. We are the survivors of those who will not be broken, who are endemic to this land, and we need to believe in that, and that our only strength is each other. And so yes, in the scale of human hurts, will we hurt each other? Yes. Should we know better now and reach towards being better than that? Yes. And to those of us who have experienced it, it's our responsibility to be the mature ones should it happen again.
Mm. And were we to bring the voice of our rurihi and koroheke of healing through these types of situations, what advice would we be providing for mokopuna so that they never have to repeat the harm, that intergenerational harm is not a part of our future?
I think it's incumbent on this generation who can speak. There's just been a whole international conference on healing from trauma. All our lot have just got back. But now that we know what to call it, we can't embed it anymore. It's us that make it part of our cultural care. Working for the iwi must be hard or you're not working. We must be hard on each other, almost like to the point of unreasonable. Well, no one goes to work for unreasonable, eh? Some of our, and I know it's said on just about everyone, we'll have to wait till they go and then those wastes can go with them. No, actually, we can heal through this while they're there, because don't you think they deserve the healing too? Whoever it is. In my house at the moment, I have the privilege of chairing Te Whakakitenga. There are people in there, we couldn't breathe the same oxygen during those challenge years. But now that we've grown, we have something that we need to tuku back. Because we didn't at the time, but now that we're past it, we might have the healing energy for what needs to happen next.
Well, let's spend some time on this period now, and let's say the last 10 years. Because you moved into a governance role, spent some time on TGH, regional councillor, now chair of Te Whakakitenga. So you've got a good governance insight into layers of the tribe's kind of evolution to this point with Te Whakakitenga. What do you hope to, what have you seen in this brief time as chair of Te Whakakitenga in terms of governance, expectation and aspiration?
I think in this 30 years, leadership has been codified to governance, and that might be part of the problem. Because governance is a deliberate act of leadership, but not the only act. So governance can grow the envelope or can restrict you to those questions within inside it. So again, it's changed the character of our leadership. Do I think that every governor has a pāhara keke that they're growing somewhere? No. But if that's one deliberate act of leadership is to grow more leaders, we've got to all ask ourselves, who's driving you around? Who is shadowing you? Who's in the room with you? How are you assuring the future knows what you're doing now so that they don't have to walk over
Have you got a driver?
Yeah. Yeah. But if I'm walking on water, show them where the stones are, you know? Or, because again, my turn holding the rope is useless if there's no one else to pull it after me. So it's kind of seeing yourself not there anymore. And unlike the trust board, we don't have the certainty of the tribal ballot. This is a 3-year gig, this electoral cycle. It is about popularity sometimes, not information and not service. So we've got to ask ourselves, what are we looking for in our tribal leaders? What do we really expect from them? What's the strength of that proposition?
You will have seen the skills of the House change over time. And what are you observing at this moment? And what are you excited about in terms of what's coming through?
Yeah. So I guess because of some of the things done in the name of post-settlement have been done through the vehicle of Te Whakakitenga, there's a lot of harm-based practice in the House that we need to unlearn. Because there's a way they debate in Wellington, we're not those people because we're all related. You can go left or right of this, but either way, he whanaunga, But we play it like that. We've adopted some ways of waananga that are not conducive to tribal upholding the mana of integrity of the people in the room. So we need to get rid of some of that, That's just hurts that we can go out of. We can breed intention, not trauma in the house now. But the biggest change is the demographic profile of my house now. So whereas we were really optimistic about the inclusion when the house was first formed, have a rangatahi member, wow. Even though some of those rangatahi were in their 40s, but wow, we've got a whole seat. Now I'm proud to say that more than a third of the house, actually near on half, are rangatahi under the 35, are bilingual and are qualified. So again, it's changed. We are getting future ready now if we lean into them and not hold them in our bias, because our learning got us this far. We need them on the waka with us to get us to the next margin. But if I was to think about Māoridom in general, we're not the believers we were of the 80s of how far we could reach. And we need to set some new Hawaii destinies because we're only reaching into the settlement, into the things we've already answered.
Well, in terms of unfinished business, or let's say, outstanding matters, what are some of the things based on your early understanding about what the settlement was designed to achieve that have not yet been achieved?
I think that fully evolved mana motuhake where marae or clusters of marae engaged in their own awesomeness. We're on the cusp of that, but we ain't there yet. That whole clearinghouse, I'm hopeful that Hopopu will become that with innovation, whereas if I showed up with a winning idea as a tribal member, I have a way of navigating through all of this to receive the support as an entrepreneur who wants to take my iwi somewhere where they can invest in my excellence. Where a young person can know now, if they choose to do that, they know how to walk through the iwi as supportive infrastructure. Those are some of the things that I would be really hopeful about. But also that, again, I'm going to pull out Uncle Bunga again, but he goes, Waikato doesn't look for leadership, it creates it. I think he might have been actually saying that about Ngāti Mahuta, and then he was generous and widened it out to Waikato because, he is a Ngāti Mahuta estate at the time. But so meaning that we recognise leadership in people and we grew them, eh? We didn't go to leadership schools and stuff like that. We sort of, look, that girl carried that whole hui, let's grow her. And are we still those people? I ask myself, are we still those people? Are we still, like you said, throwing exciting opportunities at young people so that they can, and again, not young people. So I do a lot of work with rangatahi, but I don't look after them because of their age. I look after them because they're my future. It's a deliberate investment. Your age is an advantage, but you didn't do anything about that.
I want to ask you to think of two mentors in your life that have helped you navigate life's challenges and your ability to contribute back to the tribe. Who were they? What advice did they give you? And how did you call on that to be able to help you navigate and keep grabbing the rope to pull it?
Well, outside of my dad, I'd have to say it would be, Papadora, Stanley Tukutai Widow, KE. And he only had two real, but he repeat them all the time, two real lessons for me particularly. I don't know if he had them for anyone else.
Probably just you.
Probably just me. Yeah. And one of them was, whatever you do it to the best of your ability and finish it. So for those of you that knew him, did a garden, you knew he did it because the edges were immaculate. The plants almost seemed to sing for him. And even the weeds would line up tidily. So it's that kind of guy. And then the other thing he'd said is, people will forget what you say, but they'll remember what you did. And I figured, because he'd been around a lot of talkers, me mahi, kawe waihoki te ngutu noiho. And it relates very much to a wahia, so don't tell me, show me. So all of those two, so that's Uncle Doris. And then the other one would probably be someone like Auntie Carmen. Because, she was going on about the environment when it wasn't cool to do it, but, where it wasn't about, everybody wasn't as tuned in about climate change, and she was a tree hugger before it was cool, kind of thing. And because I've always had an affinity with the environment, she was somebody that said, some of these, the bigger causes, you've just got to stick to. People will come round. And then to always go back to the taiao for recentering. Because I think we look for a lot of our oranga and things that are less, you can have an innate relationship with the taiao. You don't need to have anyone else do that for you. to centre and so. But those are two names of the many. I must say I've been most promised.
Well,
with the people that
actually,
have touched my life.
let me go to some of your memories of certain people just to bring out kind of connections. But did you ever observe the interactions between Doug Graham, Jim Bolger and Dad in any shape or form?
Probably Doug Graham and Dad, yes. They had an absolute regard for each other. There was just a fundamental respect. They weren't trying to blindside one another. They knew the enormity of what they were trying to do. So, yeah. It was like, I figured they quality talking, quality whiskey, if you know what I mean. And probably if they were having cigars, they would have been quality too, whatever it was.
And what about your observation between the interactions between Dad, Tā Tipene, at Maturata, Sir Graham Latimer, those people? Api Mahuika, Archie Taiaroa.
Archie Taiaroa.
Aye.
I think my observation was in the motu, and this is where I used to watch What is Kingitanga carry, yeah? Because I think even that would be good for the now to spend time on, because it wasn't taking responsibility for them, but it was taking our role within that responsibility. Whereas I think now people might assume is we take responsibility for them, yeah, not just our role within that responsibility. So that's a unique carry. So of course we had Māori Congress, we had all of those other hui taumatas and things like that. And lucky, Dad had a network of both academic, tribal leaders and other types of networks. So they would end up in these hui and we would hear them give support to one another. We'd go north and support Matt, and Dad had no carry in the north, but Mum did. But we go and support his mates around the place because they were all, again, just trying to progress their take was. So seeing them give each other regard, support, at the end of a phone call, give verbal support, show up to court case, show up to how many Waitangi tribunal cases, and really say nothing, but the Tainui black in the room, Kingitanga black in the room, that was enough in some cases to show our absolute, but they had real regard for each other. And again, like I said, people spoke their truth because they didn't have cell phones or press releases and stuff like that. They just had to say it at the hui and mean it.
We're coming to the end of our kōrero, and I would just want to thank you for everything that you've shared. But if you were to characterise this first 30 years of our settlement journey into a whakaaro of your making, how would you characterise this 30 years?
Wow. There's probably a tongikura for it. It's kind of like, I used to always wonder why we're still singing the old mass songs, right? I was singing, and it wasn't, but I just used to always think, gee, even she's sick of hearing them, eh? She'd like a new wire to walk through. We're thrashing them all these years later, but it was singing hope and intention for into the people, and we're still there. And I think now that we've been through the theory, got a settlement, got to this point, now we can get through to just breathing it in and being it, rather than being the study of it. We can be more responsible towards one another now because we're in the next generation of maturity for it. And then we can be more purposeful about the seeds that we want to sow. They can be all deliberate actions. I'm a deliberate result of somebody's best laid plans from the 1960s, 70s, I'm no accident, and everybody that comes after me is a promise, and I must invest in their potential to be the full promise they can be. Pretty simple, really, but it's just a moment for us to hold the rope and make it stronger for the next lot.
He
Yeah.
kōrero whakamutunga wau?
Ka whakoke I nei tanga katoa ki ngā ruruhi, ngā kaimātui me o rātou waihotanga iho mai. Just really privileged to have been grown by so many people who wanted to invest, and hoping that as a result of this exercise we become those people. That we need to give this waananga to each other as well and be very deliberate about it. So that's my hopefulness into this. And just again, acknowledge our tingane Shane Dinga Solomon, Dr. Shane Dinga Solomon, in ei rangi mōnake, that we can remember him well. And if his tauira is anything, it's with the absolute benevolence he lived his life and his gifting to the people. We should feel very lucky for that, to have had people like him. Koina.
Ngā mihi atira kia koe me o Pukinga, me o Kitinga, hei whakatakoto I mui te aroaro o te taonga nei a Raupatu, hei kohi. I ngā maramara katoa kia kopi mua tātou nei mokopuna. Mihi ana kia koe.
Thank you.